Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. This Saturday is UFC 288, and in the main event, we have Aljamain Sterling versus Henry Cejudo, and this is going to be my full breakdown and prediction, and I'm really looking forward to this main event, and I'm looking forward to UFC 288. I know it's not the best card on paper. It took a massive hit losing the co-main event, Charles Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush, but they added Bilal Muhammad versus Gilbert Burns, which is a solid co-main event. And I'm looking forward to this card, but this main event is just so highly skilled. There's so many storylines going into it. And this is a fight that I think is flying under the radar that are people are acting like, oh, who really cares about UFC 288? But this is a solid main event that is so highly skillful in one of the best divisions in the UFC. Now, also, I've already done a bunch of UFC 288 content. I'm going to be doing more UFC 288 predictions. I will link my entire UFC 288 playlist down in the description if you want to go check out any of those videos after this, and I will keep it updated as I make more prediction videos. But also, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you don't miss any of those, and also like this video if you enjoyed the prediction videos. So the main event, Aljamain Sterling versus Henry Cejudo, there's so many storylines going into this fight because Aljamain Sterling is a champion that a lot of fans consider fraudulent because of the way he won the title. Then he had a controversial rematch with Petr Yan. Then he had a controversial fight with TJ Dillashaw. We're going to talk about all those fights in this video. But there's a lot of people still considering Aljamain Sterling a fraud. And if Henry Cejudo comes back after a 3-year layoff and beats Aljamain Sterling, the story's going to be written by the fans that Aljamain Sterling was always a fraud and Henry Cejudo was just the guy to expose him. And I don't know that that's necessarily true, but that's massive. That has to be massive on Sterling's shoulders because if he loses this fight, people are going to be saying that. A lot of people are going to be saying that, and I'm not sure. With such a deep division, it's so hard to get back to a title, and I'm not so sure the UFC even loves Aljamain Sterling as champion. It's not like he's super popular. It's not like he's selling a bunch of pay-per-views. Not that Henry Cejudo would either, but I'm just saying, with the division as deep as it is, I don't see either one of these guys, if they lose this fight, I don't see them getting a title fight anytime in the near future. And for Henry Cejudo, he retired arguably in his prime. And now he sat out for 3 years. He retired as a negotiation tactic that didn't really work. I don't think he got a better contract coming back to the UFC. And now he's jumping into a title fight against Aljamain Sterling, fighting for a belt that Cejudo never lost. But he's 36 years old. If he loses to Aljamain Sterling with the depth of the division, I hate to keep mentioning the depth of the division, but with the depth of the division, I don't see Henry Cejudo building his way back to a title shot at 36 years old, 37 years old. There was a statistic that somebody put out there that said from flyweight to lightweight, nobody has ever won a belt over the age of 35. That is insane. So Cejudo here at 36 years old, you can get away with, a higher age at some of the heavier weight classes. When you're talking about flyweight, bantamweight, featherweight, lightweight, you can't really start to get close to your 40s. Otherwise, the guys are just too fast, too good, too athletic. And it's kind of Henry Cejudo, it's now or never. Maybe he's still good. Maybe he's not. That's a massive X factor in this fight that we're going to talk about later in the video because has he improved in his time off? Has he regressed in his time off? Does he have ring rust? There's so many angles to look at this fight, and it's what makes it so interesting and hard to pick as well. So if you look at the tail of the tape for this fight, you have Aljamain Sterling is 22-3. Henry Cejudo is 16-2. Sterling's the champion. Cejudo's not ranked because he retired 3 years ago. Sterling is 33. Cejudo is 36. Sterling is 5'7". Cejudo is 5'4". Sterling has a 71-inch reach. Cejudo has a 67.5-inch reach. So a 3-inch height advantage and a 3.5-inch reach advantage for Aljamain Sterling. So if you look at Henry Cejudo, of his 16 wins, 8 by knockout, 8 by decision. Of his 2 losses, once by TKO and once by decision. He comes into this fight on a 6-fight win streak, but he has not fought since May of 2020, where he fought Dominick Cruz and TKO'd him in the second round. And this fight, honestly, and I'm going to pick apart both these guys' resumes in this video, but this fight was meaningless. I know Dominick Cruz, one of the best in the world, arguably the GOAT at 135 pounds. But at the same time, Dominick Cruz was coming in off a long layoff, and he took this fight on like 2 weeks' notice. This was the first fight back. This was the first fight back after basically the world fell apart. There was no fans there. This was a co-main event of UFC 249. And Dominick Cruz took the fight because Jose Aldo couldn't get into the country. Cruz had been off for like a year and a half, 2 years, maybe even 3 years at that point in time. He was returning from an injury. And Cejudo beat him fair and square. He finished him in the second round. He was winning the fight. He was chopping the legs of Dominick Cruz. He had a little bit of trouble with the range of Cruz, and Cruz was landing some good punches. But this wasn't a fight that you can really take a lot away from, because Dominick Cruz, an aging Dominick Cruz at that, returning from a long layoff on short notice. What does that really mean? I mean, in the second round, you have Cejudo throwing. It looked like he was throwing a body kick, and Cruz kind of leaned into it, ate a knee, got dropped. Henry Cejudo attacked him with ground and pound. Keith Peterson stepped in a bit early, but I don't think it would have changed the outcome. The fight before that was against Marlon Moraes in June of 2019. And I know a lot of people, when they hear the words Marlon Moraes, they just think of CTE and brain dead and needs to retire. But Henry Cejudo is really the guy that took Marlon Moraes' soul. At this point in time, Marlon Moraes was an absolute killer, and I think this is the best win of Henry Cejudo's entire UFC career. And we're going to talk about why I don't think it's the Mighty Mouse Johnson fight in a minute. But in this fight, the first round and a half, Marlon Moraes was chopping the legs of Henry Cejudo, landing good punches. I picked Marlon Moraes in this fight. I was confident in Marlon Moraes. But after that midway point of that second round, Henry Cejudo could sense that Marlon Moraes was starting to fade, and he just started to put it on him. He started to pressure him. You know, Marlon Moraes would start leaning in with kind of massive hooks. Henry Cejudo would Muay Thai clinch him, lands knees to the body, knees to the head, and was just pressuring him nonstop. And you could see Marlon Moraes start to wilt at the end of that second round. And then in the third round, more of the same. Henry Cejudo just had that killer instinct. He could see Marlon Moraes fading, was pressuring him, landing good shots, clinching up with him, kneeing him to the head, kneeing him to the body, gets a takedown towards the end of the third round, and brutally ground and pounds him with elbows. Flash KO'd him with elbows before the stoppage even happened. The ref doesn't jump in. Then he lands some more shots. Basically flash KOs him again. The referee steps in. Solid win of Henry Cejudo. And he arguably ended the career of Marlon Moraes. The fight before that was against TJ Dillashaw back in January of 2019. A lot of people, and people forget this, a lot of people were picking TJ Dillashaw going into this fight. I picked Henry Cejudo. I didn't think the weight cut would be good for TJ Dillashaw. And Henry Cejudo finishes him in the first round. Clips him badly, follows up, hurts him again. I know TJ Dillashaw was crying. Early stoppage. It was a perfectly fine stoppage. Maybe it was a tad early, but I saw all I needed to see. I don't think it would have changed the outcome. TJ Dillashaw was done. And then we find out afterwards, TJ Dillashaw was using EPO in that fight, and arguably probably his entire career. So Cejudo beats TJ Dillashaw at flyweight and beats him while he's using EPO. And then obviously goes up and becomes the double champion when he beats Marlon Moraes. That was for the vacant bantamweight title. I forgot to mention that. The fight before that was against Demetrius the Mighty Mouse Johnson. And I know a lot of people would probably say this is the best win of his career. This was in August of 2018. He won the fight via split decision. It was a close competitive fight. I don't remember which rounds I gave to who. I thought Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson should have got the decision here. But I'll make the argument that I've made in many cases in the past. Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, one of the best in the world, one of the GOATs of the sport, to have a competitive enough fight where the split decision could go to you, that tells me all I need to know about your skill set. So Henry Cejudo proved in that fight he was one of the best in the world. And then we're getting back to like 2017 against Sergio Pettis. That win has aged well. Sergio Pettis, the champion in Bellator. His last loss was against Joseph Benavidez, but that was 7 years ago in 2016. And Joseph Benavidez, one of the best in the world, and this was a split decision loss. This was a close fight. So really, I mean, the only losses on his resume are to Joseph Benavidez and Mighty Mouse Johnson. And the fight before that was against Mighty Mouse Johnson. This was his first title shot back at UFC 197. Got finished in the first round. Demetrius caught him with knees to the body, hurt him badly, swarmed him, and finished him. But that's the only bad losses in his entire MMA career, because the Joseph Benavidez fight was very close. And either way, just for those two losses to be against two of the best flyweights in the world, I don't really think there's any shame, especially that early on in his MMA career. Moving over to Aljamain Sterling. You have Aljamain Sterling, has 22 wins. Of those 22 wins, only 3 knockouts, 8 by submission, 10 by decision, and the one infamous disqualification. Of his 3 losses, he's been knocked out once and lost twice by decision. He comes into this fight on an 8-fight win streak, but we're going to kind of pick this apart a little bit as well, because, you know, we just picked apart Henry Cejudo's. His last fight was against TJ Dillashaw at UFC 280, and this is very similar to the Cejudo-Cruz fight in a way. TJ Dillashaw came in on a full training camp, but he was injured. He came into the fight injured. TJ Dillashaw had sat out for 2 years, came back, fought Corey Sandhagen, got injured, injured his knee. It was a long while before he actually finally got the title shot, but he came in with an injured shoulder he needed surgery on. And Aljamain Sterling absolutely mauled him. Took him down, beat him up, eventually gets a TKO finish in the second round. And while he destroyed TJ Dillashaw, and he should get some credit for that, it's just super unfortunate because TJ Dillashaw kind of robbed him of the performance because his shoulder was injured. He couldn't defend takedowns. He couldn't really do anything once he got on the ground. So I don't know how much that fight really means. TJ Dillashaw aging as well, injury-ridden, doesn't really mean much. The fight before that was the rematch against Petr Yan at UFC 273. This was a split decision win for Aljamain Sterling. I thought Petr Yan won. There was no argument that outside of the first round, every other round was pretty clear. The second round was clearly Aljamain Sterling, got him down, got his back, beat him up on the ground. Third round, similar situation for Sterling. And then the fourth and fifth were clearly Yan. It comes down to that first round. And while I won't say this is a brutal robbery by any means, I thought Yan took the first round. I thought he pressured. I thought he landed good shots. But nonetheless, to show that level of improvement after the first fight against Petr Yan was very impressive. He wins the fight split decision. But people forget, in that fourth and fifth round, and I just recently rewatched it, Yan was like beating him up on the ground, out-grappling him, out-striking him. And I just feel like it was very unfortunate that the first round was so uneventful. And that's ultimately why I think Sterling got the decision, because the first round really could have went to Sterling. I thought it was Yan. But, you know, I think a lot of people delegitimize Aljamain Sterling because of that. And even though I'm kind of doing that same thing, I still know that Aljamain Sterling is one of the best in the world. I just want to put context to this victory. The fight before that, UFC 259 against Petr Yan. What can we say about this? Aljamain Sterling started very strong, pressuring nonstop, throwing combinations nonstop, crowding Petr Yan, but he started to fade. And Petr Yan started to take over. He was out grappling. He was ragdolling him. He was taking him to the ground. He was out striking him. He was chopping his legs. And then in the fourth round, it looks like he's getting ready to finish Aljamain Sterling. Aljamain Sterling's down on one knee. Petr Yan throws an illegal knee. Mark Smith shouts to the whole world, if he can't continue, it's a DQ. Aljamain Sterling flops back on the ground. It ends up being a DQ. He says, I can't fight anymore. And he gets the belt wrapped around his waist. Ben Askren recovered faster after the Jorge Masvidal knee than Aljamain Sterling did in the first fight against Petr Yan from that illegal knee. And it's just a shitty way to win the belt. And I think that's why a lot of fans have turned on Aljamain Sterling, because the way he won the belt was just so bad. But at the end of the day, it comes down on Petr Yan. He shouldn't have thrown an illegal technique. Moving down to the fight before that, he beat Corey Sandhagen at UFC 250. Went for a takedown, ended up clinching Corey Sandhagen up against the fence. Corey Sandhagen kind of makes a movement, gives Aljamain Sterling a chance to take his back on the feet. Aljamain Sterling jumps on the back. They go to the ground. There's a little bit of resistance from Corey Sandhagen. He's defending a little bit. Eventually, Aljamain Sterling, once he gets that back position and that body triangle, it is pretty much over. You were not getting out of it. And that happened to Corey Sandhagen. He couldn't get out of it, and Aljamain Sterling finds a rear naked choke. I think this is the best win of Aljamain Sterling's career, is Corey Sandhagen. That's back in June of 2020. Solid win, and we see where Corey Sandhagen is now. And even though he has 2 wins over Petr Yan and a win over former champ TJ Dillashaw, the Corey Sandhagen win from UFC 250, I believe, is the best win of Aljamain Sterling's career. You're getting back to 2019. He beat Pedro Munoz, outstruck him. But one thing I want to talk about is his last loss. His last loss was to Marlon Moraes. He got brutally KO'd back in December of 2017 against Marlon Moraes. He got caught with a knee. It was like a head kick. I can't remember exactly what it was. I think Marlon was throwing a head kick. The knee landed on Aljamain Sterling's chin, absolutely stiffened him and brutally KO'd him. But Marlon Moraes, absolute killer at this point in time. Coming over from World Series of Fighting, a champion over there, looked like an absolute killer. No shame in that loss, especially back in 2017. Doesn't mean a whole lot now, too. And the fight was competitive up until that point. It didn't last very long. It happened in the first round. And then you're getting back, you know, his other losses are all the way back in 2017, early 2017, and the middle of 2016 against Brian Caraway. It was a split decision loss. Both of them against Rafael Sanzat and Brian Caraway. So the really only clean loss of Aljamain Sterling's career is against Marlon Moraes, where he got absolutely caught by a knee. So this fight is very hard to pick because there's so many X factors. When you look at their resumes, even though I admit they are both one of the best in the world, I admit Aljamain Sterling is one of the best in the world, Henry Cejudo is one of the best in the world, their resumes you can kind of pick apart. And what makes this fight so hard to pick is you have a Henry Cejudo who had a 3-year layoff. He didn't do a whole lot in terms of fighting the elite of the elite at bantamweight because he only really fought Marlon Moraes. And then the Dominic Cruz fight, again, doesn't mean much because Dominic Cruz was coming off an injury. and, also was on short notice for Dominic Cruz and a long layoff as well. But then you also have Aljamain Sterling, who, beat a crippled TJ Dillashaw, an old TJ Dillashaw, and then I thought he lost the Jan, and, then he was going to lose the fight where he won via DQ. So it's just so hard to pick this fight. And you look at Henry Cejudo's age at 36 years old. No fighter from the weight class of flyweight to lightweight has ever won a title over the age of 35. That is a massive stat. Can Henry Cejudo be the guy to do it? I don't know. This is such a tough fight. My early prediction for this fight, what I picked when this fight was initially announced, I picked Henry Cejudo. And I do think Henry Cejudo can win this fight. I think this is a fight where both guys have multiple avenues to victory. If I had to pick out for Henry Cejudo, how does Henry Cejudo win this fight? I think he either wins by decision or TKO in the later rounds. For Aljamain Sterling, how does he win this fight? I think he either wins via decision or he wins via submission. He gets the back, he gets a choke. Or I also think Aljamain Sterling could get a KO or TKO. I don't think that's super likely. I think that's the lowest percentage. But I think both guys have endless paths to victory. And sometimes I look at that when it's a close fight. I'm like, okay, this guy has more paths to victory. I'm going to pick him. But this is a fight skill for skill. It's very hard to pick because Henry Cejudo, an Olympic wrestler, Aljamain Sterling, he's not the best wrestler, but he's a very good grappler. If he gets you down and can get your back, it's impossible to get out of that situation. So I really think this fight kind of comes down to the striking. And Aljamain Sterling has a funky striking style where it's really only effective most of the time because of the threat of the takedown. And that's why my official prediction is going to be Henry Cejudo 48-47 decision win. I could also see maybe a 49-46, but I think this fight is going to be very competitive. I think you're going to see a fight where Aljamain Sterling looks for takedowns, but Henry Cejudo is so fast with his hips, sprawling takedowns. He's an Olympic wrestler. I don't think Sterling's going to be able to take him down. I think a key factor for this fight is, can Sterling create scrambles where maybe he catches a kick and kind of, Cejudo pulls his leg out and kind of trips backwards, and then Sterling jumps on his back and gets a body triangle. I think he's going to have to create those situations if he wants to win this fight. And I just don't see him doing it against Henry Cejudo. I just think this fight is going to be primarily striking. And while Sterling does have a very funky style, he has a very unique striking style, and he does have the reach advantage, he does have the height advantage, I just think Cejudo's a little bit more technical. I think this whole time off he's been training. I don't think he's just sitting around doing nothing. He was training with John Jones. He was helping Davison Figueiredo train for Brandon Moreno. He was helping Weili Zhang. I don't think Cejudo's just been sitting around regressing. I do believe that he's been getting better in the time off. And I think Henry Cejudo's striking is better. I think that's what it comes down to. And Henry Cejudo, if he's not worried about the takedown, he has very good hands. He has very good kicks himself. And he also is very fast. He's a smaller fighter here, but I think that comes with some advantages. I think he has the speed advantage. And I don't think with Aljamain Sterling funky striking, which honestly is terrible. It looks terrible. It's not technical at all. It's effective on some guys. I just don't think it's going to work against Henry Cejudo. If Sterling wins this fight, he's going to have to just kind of land shots at range and make Cejudo, land that front kick on Cejudo's body where Cejudo can't close the distance and land with his hands. But I just don't think that's going to happen. I think Cejudo, once the fight gets into the later rounds and Sterling starts to wear down a little bit, I think Cejudo's really going to turn up the pressure because he's going to be confident. I've already stuffed a few takedowns at this point. I'm confident to move in, throw heavy punches, and throw heavy kicks, and I'm not worried about Aljamain Sterling's takedown defense, or takedown offense, And I just think he's going to land the better shots. I could see maybe Sterling getting like a round or first or second round, or, some point in the fight, I could see, maybe it's a very even on the feet, and then Sterling maybe gets a really good position, clinch position up against the fence, lands some knees, and then edges out around that way. But I just think Cejudo is going to be very fast. I think he's going to be better than ever. And I just think his hands and his striking are significantly better. And without the threat of the takedown, Sterling striking just is not super effective. He's not going to be able to land on a guy like Henry Cejudo, who's not even going to be even faintly worried about the takedown after the first round. He's going to stuff a couple while Aljamain Sterling's fresh. And I think he's going to be more confident. And as Sterling starts to fade a little bit, I think Cejudo is really going to turn it up, because we've seen Sterling, even though I'm not saying he has a stamina issue, when he starts to fade in the later rounds, he has in the Petr Yan fight. We saw it in both fights against Petr Yan. And I just think Henry Cejudo, even with Cejudo's offensive wrestling, now I don't think Cejudo's going to go out there and be able to out-grapple Sterling and take him down repeatedly, but I think he can mix it in there. And I do think Cejudo's a better wrestler, but I just don't think Cejudo's going to want to initiate those exchanges where maybe in a scramble, he gives up his back, he turns his back, and then Sterling just latches on. I don't think he's going to want to give up those situations, but I do believe if Sterling starts to become effective with his striking, with his kicks, I think Cejudo can mix it in, take down Sterling in the 3rd or 4th round, maybe get some top control there. I just think overall he's the better fighter, and unless you see a situation where for 2 or 3 rounds, you see Sterling catch a kick, create a scramble situation where he ends up on the back of Sterling or ends up on the back of Cejudo or ends up getting Cejudo down, I just don't think it's going to happen. I just don't think Aljamain Sterling can win the fight purely striking. But who knows? Cejudo may have regressed. He may be worse than ever. He may be old. He may have slowed down quite a bit. And we may see a Sterling that's able to use his kicks at range and win the fight that way, but I just don't see it happening that way. If Sterling isn't able to find any effective grappling in this fight, I think Henry Cejudo wins this fight. And if Sterling really starts to fade like he did in that first Petr Yan fight in the 4th round, I think Henry Cejudo finishes him. I debated about picking Henry Cejudo via 4th round TKO. I do think that's a very good possibility as well. But I think ultimately Sterling is so big, I just don't think Henry Cejudo's power, he never really showed significant power even at flyweight. I know he finished, TJ Dillashaw. I don't think he's going to do that to Aljamain Sterling. So it's going to have to be a combination of volume and exhaustion from Sterling. So that's why ultimately I went with Henry Cejudo via decision. But I just think Henry Cejudo is going to outstrike Aljamain Sterling. I think he's going to be chopping the legs. I think he's going to be throwing strikes, landing good punches. He's going to be the faster fighter in this fight. And I just don't think Henry Cejudo is going to be there for Aljamain Sterling to find on the feet. And I just don't think the grappling is going to be there for Sterling at all unless he creates scrambles. And I just don't think he's going to be able to do that in a way where he's able to get 3 rounds and win this fight. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Who are you picking in this fight? And whoever wins this fight, I think is going on to fight Sean O'Malley. And then if they win that fight, which I would favor whoever wins this fight to beat Sean O'Malley, they're probably going to try to challenge for a featherweight title. So it's going to be a very interesting matchup here. Whoever wins is going to be in a very good spot. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.